Okay.
Hi. So I'm Jonathan Shorman. This is Tim Carpenter. We're both reporters at the Capitol Journal, and we are going to try to take a few minutes here to sift through the Gannon ruling this morning. There is no script. We have not scripted this out, so bear with us, but come along with the journey as we kind of try to figure this out. But basically, we did have a major ruling from the Kansas Supreme Court this morning in the Gannon decision. Unanimous ruling. They found that school funding is inadequate in Kansas. And so specifically, they referred to something called the Rose Standards in making that determination. And the Rose Standards are a set of educational standards that originated in Kentucky, where they basically found that, students are not being properly educated, and those standards, I believe, also put somewhat of an emphasis on minority students and finding that they need additional resources. So, with that said, the court did place a June 30 deadline for the legislature to act, although they did not, as has been their custom, they did not release a specific funding amount for the legislature to shoot for. Although we've had some kind of guidance in the past, so there's been some talk about, maybe it would be upwards of $500 million, maybe less, maybe more, but we don't have a specific amount. But that leads us into the need for the legislature to act, the ticking clock that we're now on. And Tim, talk to us about what do you think the legislature is going to need to do here, and what have they talked about, maybe what are the possibilities?
So first of all, the governor vetoed a massive tax increase bill that the House and Senate passed, and so right now we're at square one on fixing a massive budget deficit. This only compounds the problem when you've got to come up with some serious money for the public schools immediately. So it adds pressure to adopt some form of tax increase to provide new revenue. The June 30 deadline is, the clock is ticking, as you said. The legislature is going to come back next week, and they're going to have to get to work on the budget and on school finance, and those are heavy lifts for them. It's not clear exactly where all the money is going to come from for all of this, but you could expect your taxes to go up by the end of the year. The one thing to keep in mind in the legislature is from the 2016 election, there are a heck of a lot more moderate Republicans and Democrats in the legislature who want to fix the school finance problem. It's been ongoing for years. The litigation percolates, and I think people are looking for a really solid response from the legislature to get the funding and the constitutional funding issues resolved.
Yeah, we kind of saw that in the initial reaction we got from Alan Roop, who's the attorney for the school districts that sued, the plaintiff school districts that sued in this case, basically saying, he expects the legislature to act quickly. And I think he actually, I don't know if you have the statement, Tim, but I think he alluded to, the 2012 tax policy and kind of making a connection that could be partially repealed in order to generate some additional cash.
Yeah, it's certainly, no matter, the plaintiff's attorneys are very pleased with this ruling, as you might expect. Democrats in the legislature who want to spend more money on schools are pleased. So far we've heard nothing from the governor, we've heard nothing from the Attorney General, we've heard nothing from the leadership of Republican leadership of the House and Senate, people who presumptively are unhappy with the court's unanimous ruling. So it's clear, as you said, that elements of the 2012 tax law that were embraced by Governor Brownback are going to be repealed. And that's where you get big chunks of money going forward to fund schools. One other point about funding the school situation is that there's a possibility the legislature could slowly stair-step their way into a real solution for this. I think that the legislature adopted a 2-year plan, a 3-year plan to improve funding of education, K through 12 schools, that maybe the Supreme Court might bite on that, knowing the massive fiscal problems the state government has.
And you mentioned Republican leaders probably not going to be happy about this ruling, but it will be interesting to see how far did they go in that opposition and expressing their displeasure. Last year, when there was an equity ruling, by way of background, the Gannon case has been kind of split into two parts: the large adequacy part, the smaller equity funding part. The equity funding part was decided last year by the court, You know, there was a lot of conservative Republican lawmakers who were not happy with that ruling either. And, you know, at some point, various people have said, well, why don't we just ignore the court ruling, or why can we, is there a way to push back? You know, the legislature we're the appropriators, it's not the court's place to tell us what to do. And so it'll be interesting to see if we hear more of that rhetoric this time around, and how high up that rhetoric.
If this was a legislature in 2014, for example, there would be much more talk about challenging this opinion, a constitutional crisis. But maybe the legislature has changed it enough that that will be less of an issue. We'll just have to see how it goes. And you're talking about when you get a lot of zeros tacked on to the end of these numbers, you know, that's where you get a lot of conflict in the State House.
What?
I've just got a question. This is
Yeah,
Clay Wirestone, the news editor from Off Camera here. But what do you guys think of it, of the fact that this was a unanimous ruling? Is that a factor?
So if you went to any of these oral arguments, you could discern, a layman could discern that the state was going to lose this case, that the questions that were asked and answered in the lower court level and at the Supreme Court level gave you some sense that the state had very little chance of winning this case. So nobody should be surprised by the outcome. As far as it being unanimous, well, the solidarity matters, and this is the Supreme Court, and they all agree in this case, including an appointee of Governor Brownback.
Well, I think it's important to, we should note there was a couple of justices that also recused themselves.
I see.
I think
That's
Stengel
right.
might have been one of them. I'm trying to
Okay,
remember
you're right.
who was.
I was just told that Stengel abstained.
Yeah.
Abstained.
So Caleb Stegall, the governor's lone appointee to the Supreme Court, recused himself.
But I mean, but there is a point there in that, you know, 5 of those justices did face retention votes in November, and they were, all 5 of them were retained, despite some efforts and pressure to oust them for various reasons. And so, you know, this is
we
a
also
newly
got
empowered
word that
court.
Beyer abstained as well.
Okay.
So there's 2
Right,
abstentions.
so you make a great point. Last year in the election, the governor and a lot of the conservatives tried to run Supreme Court justices out of office, and that attempt fell flat on its face. So the same Supreme Court that was here in the past is here today, and they issued this strong ruling, and now it's up to the legislature to respond.
Yeah. So thanks so much for watching. It was a little bit of an experiment for us, but I hope you all enjoyed your time. Do we have, if we have any questions or any comments that to respond to? Otherwise,
no, we actually do.
We
have
do?
We
Okay.
do have a question that just popped up, actually. Tony Rangel asks, will there be a repeat of the situation last year where the courts will not allow the schools to operate without adequate funding?
Say that, explain that question again.
He said, will there be a repeat of the situation last year where the courts will not allow the schools to operate without
you're
adequate
suggesting,
funding?
could the schools be closed down?
Right.
There will people be jumping out of the 3rd floor windows of the Capitol before they shut down the schools. That is immensely politically unpopular. That will not happen.
But I guess the question is too, though, could the court threaten that if there was, you know, if they didn't think?
I think it's just totally toxic. And the court doesn't want to do it. The governor doesn't want to do it. The legislature doesn't want to do it. You know, I just think there'd be a public rebellion if little kids weren't able to go to school because a bunch of grown-ups are still arguing.
now that being said, I mean, there could be a game of chicken for a little while, but I agree with Tim. I don't think it would actually ever happen.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
All right. Thanks a lot.
yeah. Thanks,
Oh,
guys.
wait a second. Nope, there's another question
Okay.
from Kendra Bozarth asks, do you think this puts tax reform on a fast track? Or is that a separate piece? How do you see?
Well, maybe the budget fix that they needed to address the current deficit in the current fiscal year, which ends June 30th, that might give them more incentive to act and resolve and work together. But the whole problem just got bigger. So, you know, they're going to have to come up with a plan that pulls ideas from other areas and from other constituencies to try to put together a package that's going to pay for all of this. So they're going to have a kumbaya moment here to get their work done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
All right, well, now we have to get back to work, but thanks for tuning in, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.
Oh my